Welcome back, everybody. We have a half an hour break after this session and then the closing ceremony, so please stay around after this talk. Right now we have a great talk by Harriet Farlow and Chantelle Ralevska on your Oceans 11 team. We're the AI guys, technically girls. Let's welcome them to the stage.
Ransomware group is taking credit for a massive cyber breach.
MGM Resorts International says it has been hit by a cyber attack.
TVs around the casino, couldn't gamble. At this point, we're wondering, what are you paying for?
It's September 11th, 2023, and over at the MGM casinos in Las Vegas, something just isn't right. All of a sudden, guests begin to notice that their room keys no longer work, the casino's computer systems are completely offline, their ATMs and slot machines are also broken, and as a result, the casinos begin losing millions of dollars with every passing day.
Rumor has it the attackers behind the hack were none other than security startup founders Chantelle Ralevska and Harriet Farlow. They really do mean it when they say startup life isn't easy. Legend has it, they're targeting Singapore, Canberra, and Sydney's casinos next.
So the rumours are in fact true. That was Harriet and myself. Fortunately for us, Scattered Spider and Black Cat and a number of other APTs took the blame for the attack. So here we are 1 year later with our next victim, Canberra Casino. Only in cybercrime are people actively willing to take credit for crimes they didn't commit. For those of you I haven't met, my name is Chantelle Ralevska, and in addition to hacking casinos, which I clearly love to do in my spare time, my passions and expertise lie in the people side of cybersecurity, which, as I'm sure all of us know, regardless of our disciplines or the cybersecurity controls our organisation puts in place, we're only as strong as our weakest link, which is why the user is so critical, and that's what I do in my company Cyber, where we deliver tailored awareness programs as well as OSINT assessments. So that's really what I'm going to focus on in this presentation today. And a lot of the presentations have been highly technical, so hopefully I can bring a little bit more of the psychological as well. Harriet, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Chantelle. Hello, everyone. I'm Harriet Farlow. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm actually from Canberra, and this is my first time presenting at BSidesCbr, so it feels like a very special crowd. I've been working at the intersection of AI and security for almost a decade now. I originally studied physics, but soon found that artificial intelligence and data science was my calling. I worked in consulting for a while on defense projects, moved to the USA to work for a startup, came back to work for the Australian government for a certain agency. You know, we're all one of those kinds of people here, right? And then while I was doing that, I started my PhD in adversarial machine learning, which is basically the ability to hack AI systems. And I realized that there just wasn't a lot of resources in the outside world for companies to be able to secure their systems. So I started my company, Maleva Security Labs, about 1.5 years ago with that goal. The last time I presented my part of this talk was at DEF CON in August, which was amazing but also terrifying, and I'm not usually scared of public speaking, but I think that particular talk was by far the scariest thing I've ever done. So it's really nice to be at a friendly crowd like here in Canberra, although speaking to sort of friends and colleagues and past colleagues is in some ways a bit scarier, I think. But I remember for the DEF CON talk, because I'm a noob, I had to do a shot on stage, which may or may not have been to my benefit or detriment. But I do recall telling everyone that if that event were in Australia, you wouldn't be doing a shot on stage, you'd be doing a shoey. And I don't know if that's a legacy of Australians I'm proud of sharing, but there we go, that's what it is. So we're all familiar with the concept of a heist, right? The origin for this work started with wanting to understand how AI security, like the impact of security of AI systems and AI for security, impacted different industries. And I thought, what better industry to look at than the casino industry? Not only is it an industry where there's really high high demands for companies to be secure and trustworthy because people are sort of losing money there, but because the companies have such an onus to handle that data sensitively, and especially in today's economic climate, that's even harder. And of course, because DEF CON in Vegas, I thought the casino element might be really nice. So a lot of the research actually started with me interviewing people at Casino Canberra, right around the corner from here. So thank you very much to those folk. And Casino Canberra might not be exactly what we imagine of, the kind of casino in Vegas, right? But I really wanted to look at the implications of AI insecurity in this context through a heist. And, Chantelle and I, we're both startup owners. Life is not easy in the early stages of a startup. We really need to get some cash. So we decided that, thinking about that from the perspective of criminals trying to steal money from casinos through some of the recent hacks that we've seen would be a really cool angle to it, even if we don't see as many George Clooney's as we'd like. But I think we all get the premise of a heist, right? So these are our objectives for today. So we're going to rob the casino. First of all, Chantelle is going to be conducting some OSINT and socially engineering our target to elicit the information that we need. I'm then going to exploit that information and hack the facial recognition AI of the casino using an attack that I created. And then Chantelle is going to look at the implication of deep fakes in the setting as well, not just for casinos, but for lots of industries. And then we're going to profit, of course. But also, we should really talk about what your organization can do to protect itself. So there's a few disclaimers. Obviously, these are real attacks we're talking about and real attacks that could be implemented. But this presentation itself is educational and fun. We're not showing you exactly how to implement the attacks, although there are lots of sort of resources that we've put online or other people have put online that show you how to do that. But we're ethical hackers. And Casino Canberra was very generous with their time. We had permission to do this kind of research, and we're very grateful for them. So something that you might not be aware of is the incredible increase of AI security-related incidents in companies and organizations on the whole. Like, I've been working in this field since 2021, and I remember when I first started and I'd come to these kinds of security conferences, and I was the only AI person there, and I was sort of that, it was a bit novel, it was a bit random. But now, as of 2024, 77% of organizations have reported AI-related security incidents in 2024. And that sort of covers, AI for security and security of AI, but even in, my field, it's greatly increasing. It's really important overall. So this is why it's important. But I do have a fun question for you, because I have some Maleva challenge coins to give away. Because, of course, you have to have a challenge coin, right? We're all from government. So the first two people to come up to me at the end of the presentation with the correct answer to this question, what is the percentage increase from 2023, within 5% error, can win a challenge coin.
Okay. Thanks. So I'm going to start off by setting the scene of the MGM hack, because that really was the context for how we decided to target Casino Canberra. So as you would have seen from the video earlier, it's been over 1 year since the MGM fell victim to a cyber attack that was, of course, perpetrated by Harriet and myself. So leveraging LinkedIn, we were able to identify an IT specialist who became our target, and we gathered as much information on this target as possible, enabling us to call the MGM help desk and socially engineering them into resetting this employee's password. And the only information that was needed was the name, employee ID, and date of birth, which I'm sure all of us can agree that with a little bit of effort, that information can be so easily sourced. So from that, we were able to gain access to the MGM's network, and our victim was actually an administrator with advanced privileges across the MGM systems. So that gave us access to MGM's Okta and Azure tenant environments. So some reports say that we stole 6 terabytes worth of data, including personal information about customers, so names, email addresses, passport information, social security numbers, the list goes on and on. Regardless of that, the MGM refused to pay our ransom, and when they detected that we were on the system, they shut down their OctaSync servers and essential infrastructure, which was what actually caused all the disruptions, from the digital reservation systems not working to key cards and so on. So here we are 1 year later, ready to target our next victim, Canberra Casino. And the reason that the MGM hack it's not unique in the slightest. It really does sit at the nexus of several cybersecurity trends, and that is the increasing targeting of the user, which is why education, awareness, and the human element of cybersecurity is so important. And 98% of all cyber attacks are the result of some element of social engineering. So these are the 3 stages of our attack today. I'm going to start by infiltrating the casino's network and gaining initial access. And from that, I'm going to escalate my access by gaining more credentials, and then ultimately exfiltrate data and hopefully demand a ransom and make money from the attack. So reconnaissance. Reconnaissance is such an important stage when it comes to cyber attacks, because we know that with a lot of sophisticated threat actors like APTs, reconnaissance is a huge component, because social engineering is really the cornerstone of their attack operations. So OSINT is what we're using today for our reconnaissance, and OSINT is, or open source intelligence, is the process of gathering and analysing publicly available information, either online, so through the surface web or the dark web, or offline, to form conclusions and answer specific questions. There are multiple tools that I use when it comes to OSINT. We've got government records, we have internet search engines, social media, the dark web, the list goes on and on. So why OSINT? Traditionally used in law enforcement, OSINT has really expanded in its use over the past few years and is being used by a number of other industries and organisations. So OSINT's a really powerful tool in identifying vulnerabilities, being able to identify potential security threats, and bolster an organisation's security. And it's used for a range of different purposes as well, from executive protection, which is what we use it for at my company, to cyber threat intelligence, supply chain risk management, the list goes on and on. And a recent report came out actually this year that by 2033, they estimate the OSINT industry will be worth more than $58 billion. So it's only becoming more and more important. But of course, the dark side of OSINT is that anything that we find as cybersecurity practitioners can of course be found by attackers as well. And that is exactly what we're using it for today, because our purpose is to infiltrate Canberra Casino. So similar to the MGM attack, I'm starting with LinkedIn to be able to identify my target. And fortunately, Casino Canberra has a much smaller security team with only 12 people. So I've selected my target, Henry Golan. He is the Director of Security and Surveillance. Now, the points of data that we look for when profiling a victim as an attacker is, of course, passwords, email addresses, phone numbers, where they live, their friends and family. So our aim is to gather all of this information by using OSINT. So from Henry's LinkedIn account, we're able to, within a matter of seconds, find his email address and his phone number by using Contact Out, which is a data broker. So that's a tip for you guys today. Go home and contact a number of data brokers and request that your data be removed from their platforms. Now, of course, once we have a piece of data like an email address, we can very simply find a password. I'm using a platform, an OSINT tool here called Exposed, which is very similar to Have I Been Pwned in the sense that it tells you what data breaches your email address has been a part of. But unlike Have I Been Pwned, it actually tells you the exact passwords that were breached. So maybe don't tell too many people about this tool, because that could have us in danger, because attackers don't even need to purchase the data breach. They can just use this tool and visibly see your credentials. The first is to compromise Henry's home Wi-Fi. So because I'm here in Canberra, I know exactly where Henry lives. I've actually driven to Henry's house. I sat outside for a few hours and I'm executing a home network compromise attack. So how did I do this? Well, to execute this attack, I'm using what is known as an AirCrack NG suite and an Alpha network adapter so that I can sniff all the traffic within my vicinity. But I only care about Henry and his network because he's my target. So I've been able to identify and locate his BSSID, which is his Wi-Fi network name, because Henry uses his family name as his Wi-Fi name. So what I want to do here is I want to crack the four-way handshake. And the four-way handshake is what authenticates your device to your Wi-Fi network. And how can I crack that four-way handshake? Well, one way that I can do this is by using something called a deauthentication attack. So I can send an authentication frame to the network, which will force all devices on that network to deauthenticate and then reauthenticate. And in the meantime, I've been able to intercept and capture that four-way handshake, which is that encrypted password. Then I've gone home and I've cracked the packets and I've been able to identify what Henry's network password is. And I've cracked his home Wi-Fi. There are a range of things that I can do now that I'm in Henry's network. I can sniff all the traffic on the network and decrypt everything. I can run a man-in-the-middle attack and I can compromise every single device on that network. So from his daughter's devices to his own device, I can intercept his IoT devices and persistently listen to everything going on in that house. The list goes on and on. I can also steal his credentials as well, so his passwords and his session cookies. And the most important thing is that I can impersonate Henry and access the casino's assets. So when it comes to home networks are not monitored networks, which means they're so much less secure and possible to hack. And when we think about hybrid ways of working, which almost every single organization works in a hybrid way, it poses a serious risk to an organization's security. And of course, Wi-Fi credentials. I mean, how many of us have actually gone and reset our Wi-Fi username and password? Probably not many of us, and they're generic, and that means that they can be cracked in a matter of hours. Now, attack vector number 2. Say I am not in Canberra and I can't sit outside Henry's house and crack his home Wi-Fi. Well, I can actually send him a targeted phish. And given everything that we've learned about Henry so far through our reconnaissance, we are going to socially engineer him in the most targeted way possible. So we know that Henry loves caravanning, and from his Facebook, he actually recently sold his caravan, so he could be on the market for a new caravan at the right price. So I've sent him this phishing email that's beautifully created about second-hand luxury caravans here in Canberra. There are two options here. I could attach a malicious attachment, which when the macros are enabled would deploy malicious code. However, given that Microsoft now warns users when they're enabling macros, it's a lot less stealthy. So I'm going to go for the second option, which is to send a malicious link. And when Henry clicks on this malicious link, I just also wanted to say that URLs are now the most popular delivery mechanism for cybercrime as well, which is probably for this reason. But when Henry clicks on that link, he's going to be redirected to this page, and in the background, a JavaScript exploit will be deployed, which will basically give me access to Henry's browser, and I can control and compromise his entire browser. And as we know, browsers have so many permissions, which is incredibly dangerous because it means I can do so many things. I can move laterally from the browser, I can again install malware onto his device, I can same process those last two. I can steal credentials, passwords, session cookies, and I can, of course, which is our priority, impersonate Henry and access the casino's assets, either apps and data. And then exfiltrate data and demand a ransom, because depending on what sort of threat actor you are, depends on obviously what your intentions are. But in this instance, we're financially motivated, so that is what we want to do. But I'll hand over to Harriet now to talk about the AI component.
Thank you, Chantelle. So cool. Okay, we're going to switch gears a little bit, and instead of looking at some traditional cybersecurity like incidents or ways that we can use AI for those. We're going to look at the security of AI themselves. So I mentioned before that I started this work with Casino Canberra because I had a few assumptions, I guess, in how AI was used at casinos. And I thought, well, Chantelle and I need to make some money, so how can we try and exploit those systems? I assumed that AI would be used for things like surveillance, game monitoring, facial recognition, person detection, but I thought that game monitoring would be one of the most important forms of AI use in casinos. I was actually really wrong. It turns out that facial recognition is by far the most important use of artificial intelligence in casinos, because it turns out that even though casinos obviously want to monitor the games, that is very much still dependent on humans to do that through security cameras, to then identify the people that then need to be fed into the facial recognition system so that they're prevented from entering in future. So I understood that facial recognition is a really vulnerable form of artificial intelligence. It's something that we definitely want to try and exploit. So let's do that now. So to clarify, we're not looking at AI for hacking, we're looking at hacking an AI system itself. And this is actually quite a new idea for a lot of people. It's definitely changed quite a lot over the last few years in terms of recognition and how seriously it's taken. So can I get a show of hands, people in the room who'd consider themselves an AI person? Will you use AI quite a bit? The lights are so bright. Okay, so that's not many people. So that's sort of what I expected. So it's traditionally not been really seen as part of the cyber and information security world, I guess, to consider novel attacks on AI systems, but it's becoming really important and it's moving from just an academic field into something we're actually starting to see in the real world right now. So the field that it's come from is this academic field called adversarial machine learning. And this is basically the idea to hack AI systems, to manipulate them or disrupt them so they do the wrong thing, basically. So this example here is of a computer vision machine learning model looking at two stop signs. One is normal, one is coated in a special adversarial paint. And for the one that's in this, with this adversarial paint, it's misclassified as a sports ball with 80% accuracy, even though to a human, that's still clearly a stop sign. So we can imagine how this kind of implications would be really significant for computer vision problems and things like autonomous vehicles, where they need to be able to recognize stop signs. This is the original adversarial machine learning example, I guess you could call it. So the idea was that you have a clean image and then you add specially crafted adversarial noise to that image so that a human can't really tell that it's there, but it's able to disrupt a model really considerably. So we add this special noise to the panda image and then the model misclassifies it as a gibbon with over 99% confidence. And this isn't just random noise, this is noise specially crafted based on the target model that you're trying to disrupt, or some kind of surrogate or proxy. This kind of attack, I guess, was proposed in sort of 2013, and the field has moved a lot since then. When I first started my PhD, and I told my supervisors I wanted to look at adversarial machine learning, they were kind of like, "Are you sure? I don't think that's ever going to be a real thing. Like, you might be shooting your career in the foot." Well, I proved them wrong, unfortunately, because now there are lots of AI incidents, and companies are really starting to struggle with how to actually defend against these kinds of attacks. This is an example of some really popular kinds of attacks. If you can't read the words very well, the point I want to get across is that for all the different kinds of machine learning models and AI systems you have, at the top I have an example of a computer vision model, which is a convolutional neural network, and then on the bottom a natural language processing model, which is a transformer, which is the backbone of things like GPT. For all of those different, I guess, attack surfaces, you could call it, there's over 100 different kinds of different attacks now that you could implement on models like this. They're different to traditional cyber and information security attacks. And they occur at all different stages along the sort of machine learning life cycle, from training to inference. And it's something that's really important, and it's growing. A way, instead of talking about all those 100+ attacks, a way that I like to describe the attacks is by the 3D model. Can I get a show of hands for anyone who saw Tanya's presentation on Thursday, the one about TikToks and adversarial noise? Okay, so that's a lot of people. So she did a great job, fortunately, of explaining adversarial machine learning, so now I don't have to. But for those of you who didn't, I will still go into it. But basically, we co-authored this paper that proposed this model as a threat-centric way that sort of complements the CIA triad, but for adversarial attacks. So a good way of grouping them up is by thinking of them as being able to either disrupt, deceive, or disclose. So if you're disrupting an AI system, you're just not making it work at all. If you're deceiving it, you're not making it work, but in a very specific way. So if we think back to that stop sign example, a disrupt attack would be if a Tesla doesn't recognize a stop sign. And then a deceive attack would be if it recognizes that stop sign instead as a speed sign. We've chosen that target classification. And then a disclosure-based attack is just being able to leak sensitive data about the training data or the model information itself. Now, the idea of hacking an AI system has existed as long as AI, however you decide to define it. So something like algorithm hacking has existed since the 1990s. And some really interesting examples in the casino context, I'll talk through very quickly. So the first one is from the 1990s, and a man who was employed by the Nevada Gaming Commission or Authority Board, something like that, he was able to get access to the seed of the random number generator that generated the numbers in a Keno game. And he was able to make $100,000 from Keno games by exploiting that information to guess the correct number. So that's an example of hacking that random number generator algorithm without necessarily having to do adversarial machine learning. Another example that I think is really interesting is actually card counting and blackjack. If we think about it, the blackjack algorithm itself is one where you can exploit it. If you play perfect strategy, for example, you know the way that you can minimize the dealer's advantage. Any of the games in the casinos have an advantage to the casino from 2% to 25%. The 25% top end would be something like the slot machine, and the only reason it stops at 25% is because that's by law, by regulation. But a game like blackjack can be as low as 2% if you play perfect strategy, and then if you implement card counting on top of that, you can make that even lower. So that's an example of algorithm hacking as well. But the reason that adversarial machine learning as a field is quite different is because it exploits architectures inherent to machine learning models. And what's really important about the machine learning training process is the idea of minimizing error through many, many iterations. So I think most of us are familiar of machine learning as a concept. You basically have your input data, some sort of output label or prediction, and then over a training process, the model is able to map that input to the output. And the way that it's able to do that is by tracking the loss, so the error. And it does that by a gradient function. So we'd probably remember the concept of a gradient from math. It's sort of like the slope of something. Basically, we're tracking the slope of the algorithm as it goes from high error to minimum error. And the way that attackers can use that is that if we know the information about a model and how it was trained to minimize error, we can exploit that to maximize the error, or at least maximize the error within a specific epsilon value or small amount. So it's just at a level that it passes over a classification boundary, but not at a level where it's really obvious to a human. And so if we think about the machine learning training process of something like a convolutional neural network, where you go from your input images through the training process and then you end up with a probability of who you're looking at the end, it uses that gradient function, and we can exploit that as an attacker. So I mentioned before that I used to work in the government, and something that I was really interested in for my PhD in adversarial machine learning was, instead of having to create an attack where you basically perturb the target object or the entirety of the image frame, the entire picture, what if we could only perturb small regions within it, and beyond that, not actually have to perturb the target object itself, but perturb regions around it. So I'm imagining that if you have a computer vision model pointing at, me, for example, instead of recognizing me, I could have small, physical objects placed around me that basically disguise me or can act as camouflage. And because I was in defense, I was sort of interested in applying this to urban camouflage environments. I think I need to play the video here. There's always a tech issue. That's okay. So it was just a quick clip of showing the ship moving with these, what I call distributed adversarial regions around it. So this is a still of it. So basically, if I could place these regions, these adversarial regions that are distributed around an object to sort of camouflage it from detection. So this U-boat would instead be classified as a ship. And you could make these sort of dynamic, they could move around. I was interested in exploring that. And the technique called distributed adversarial regions, or DARS, I found to be really effective for object detection. So being able to disguise things like ships or cars or boats, or planes, that kind of object. It worked quite a lot. So I thought, if we want to make money from the casino, and we know that they use facial recognition, how could we apply this to my face so I can walk into a casino and it doesn't recognize me, even if I've been logged as someone that they might want to prevent from walking in?
Is it not working?
Maybe it's the internet. Because demos never work, I did download the video here, so I'm going to play it locally. Thank goodness for fail-safes. So as I talk through this, I might just put it on 2x speed, so it's not quite so long. But basically, this is an example of implementing this attack. I know that watching code might not be all that interesting for some people. All of this is on Git, so if people are sort of interested, you can go check it out later anyway. But basically the point is that you can implement this very quickly for this one image example that I'm demoing here. So the idea was that if I want to add sort of regions around my face to prevent the facial recognition, what kind of object could I put around my face? Well, I decided on jewelry. So if you're a man and you're not wearing jewelry yet, well, it's 2024, so you should really consider it, especially if you want to walk into a casino and defeat the facial recognition. But basically, by being able to exploit the internal gradient function and the parameters of the facial recognition models that I was testing as part of this research, I tested a bunch of different open source facial recognition models. I could optimize for the ideal area within sort of a range that makes sense for some jewelry within the image frame, and optimize the specific sort of pixel values that I want to have as those pieces of jewelry, and then do things like add different colored filters so that it's not just random sort of pixelated regions as jewelry. And I found that it worked quite well at being able to disguise me or somebody like me, because at the end of the day, it's just an optimization problem. Thank you, Chantelle.
It's okay.
And what I'm really trying to do is just is add data to me or to this image in such a way that it causes the model to move up a classification boundary, for example. So it's going from recognizing me to not recognizing me. So I can encode information in these sort of pixelated regions and then turn them into jewelry. The screen probably isn't, you can't see it well enough, but behind the filters there's lots of different pixel values that are sort of encoding that information. And so this can be used as both a disrupt attack, so it just doesn't recognize me, but it can also be used as a deceive attack. Like I can encode information about specific people, like our target that Chantelle was able to elicit information about, so that they could instead be recognized as well. It's working. So this is an image of me walking up to a facial recognition camera. It was a day where I really should have done my hair, but it's Canberra and very cold, so that's what I have. And I can walk up and the facial recognition doesn't detect me. So this is an example of a disrupt attack. Do that again. You can see that even though it does tend to use a facial sort of boundary box, a lot of the time it doesn't work. And so we can encode that information with, say, Henry Golan. so that there is a match found, and that's an example of a deceive attack. And then, of course, we're able to profit. Now, we can use an attack like that to be able to get into the casino and do whatever we like. This is an attack that we can use very flexibly. So I tested this on lots of open source models, like I mentioned. And the reason I did this instead of relying on proprietary facial recognition models was because, you know, as a researcher, you don't always have access to that. Even if I did, I wouldn't necessarily want to exploit that, you know, in front of a big crowd. But most of the time from my research, I've found that a lot of companies do tend to rely on open source models anyway. And that's a really big challenge when it comes to the field of machine learning. Because of the optimization that's inherent in machine learning and in the process, even if an organization were to create their own custom machine learning facial recognition model, they're likely going to be training on exactly the same data set as these open source models anyway, or at least information like it. And so the thing about machine learning models is that they tend to converge. So I was able to use just these open source models really effectively, and this is sort of the number that I got. Now, during Tanya's talk, she talked quite a lot about how AI creates a new attack surface when you add it to a cyber system. Like there's new attacks that you can implement against an AI system that's different to traditional cyber and information security based attacks. And so when I talk about a number like 40.4%, that's something that's quite different about machine learning because it is inherently probabilistic. So it's not like this attack worked 40.4% of the time. This 40.4 represents the decrease in classification confidence for a model when I feed it different images. So this means that if, as a data scientist, I set the threshold between maybe, yes, it recognizes me, and no at 90%, if the original image had a classification confidence of 95%, and then on average I'm able to decrease that classification confidence by over 40%, that's enough to push it down the boundary so it doesn't recognize me. Even if it still, thinks it's me at 50%, that doesn't necessarily matter because of that threshold that I've coded into the model. So this is really important because so many organizations are relying on these kinds of models now. And at the end of the day, this is sort of low-hanging fruit, really. Like this attack isn't that difficult or complicated to implement. And often I get asked if people, if criminals or threat actors would really go to all the effort to deceive an AI system. Which as cyber professionals is ridiculous, right? Because we know just how much money and time different threat actors will spend on trying to get into computer systems. So we know that they're actually trying to do this on AI systems now too. And this is a really important consideration beyond casinos and beyond us just trying to make money, because there is facial recognition being used everywhere for surveillance, for airports, for being able to unlock our phone. And so making sure that these kinds of models are really robust to even basic attacks like a DAR is really important, and something that I urge you as cyber professionals to really consider how you can contribute your skills here. But without that, we want to move on to the next stage of our attack.
Thanks. So a lot of the discourse around deepfake attacks is very much leveraging deepfake technology to clone someone and scam either a friend or family member or an organization out of millions of dollars. And we saw this earlier in the year with a UK-based engineering company where a finance worker joined a Teams meeting with who they thought was the chief financial officer and a number of other colleagues, and then wired across $25 million to several different accounts. And the reality was that he was in a call with every single person in that call was a deepfake. But what I wanted to talk about today was actually leveraging deepfake technology and the threat that deepfake technology poses to disrupting political and economic landscapes. So for us, we don't just want to hack Canberra Casino, we want to ruin Canberra Casino's reputation, because our next step is to actually target the casinos in Sydney and Melbourne. So we hope that by ruining Casino Canberra's reputation, more people will go to those casinos, spend more money, that when we target them, it will be more profitable for us in the long term. And for a lot of the organizations that a lot of you work for, and for myself having worked in banking before this, that's really the threat of deepfakes that we're seeing. Being able to clone a high-profile executive and say something incredibly outlandish that could impact the market value of that company, making the share value drop that a malicious adversary can then go and purchase shares at a cheaper price. So this is one of many reasons the World Economic Forum ranks AI-generated misinformation and disinformation as the biggest threat to humanity over the next 2 years, even surpassing global warming, which is massive. So, I might have to do that as well. Is it this one?
Right down the bottom. Yeah.
So that being said, I've deepfaked our CEO of Canberra Casino, Nicole, here, and she's got a message that I'll then stream online and impact.
Hi, my name is Nicole, and I'm the CEO of the casino.
It's frozen. I think the laptop's frozen.
The laptop's frozen? Oh no.
And who doesn't want to see Nicole Kidman on the screen?
Maybe casino cameras hacking us back.
Maybe. Well, anyway, you get the idea. Are those?
Show the train screen.
That's okay. I can just talk to it. Okay. But basically, with one video of Nicole Kidman, I was able to clone her exact voice and image and produce that video with my own deepfake tools, where she's saying to not spend money at Canberra Casino and that Canberra Casino is not above board. So that's the general gist, but I just wanted to, I guess, shift the discourse around deepfakes and the threats, not just on scamming companies, but actually on how that can impact economic landscapes and market value of organizations. So moving on to how you can protect your organization, there's so many things that we can do, and I had a slide on it, which I'm not sure if it's going to come up now. Is it still frozen?
Can you keep talking?
Yeah, that's okay. Lucky I remember. The first is, of course, education. So tailored education for different groups of people. And if we think about the MGM hack where the attackers socially engineered the MGM help desk, having only 3 points of data that you need to verify and it not being trained appropriately as a help desk on how to identify social engineering are just a few of the issues at play. And that's why having education programs that are very tailored to different groups, because everyone has a different relationship with cybersecurity. And I think for a lot of us, we're so ingrained in the industry that we forget that a lot of people don't have nearly as much knowledge as we have. I reached out just last week actually to one of Australia's largest private hotel owners, and this man is a billionaire and he's also a doctor, so he's an incredibly intelligent person. And I said to him, Jerry, I'd love to deepfake you for my LinkedIn for the purpose of education. And he replied to me and he said, absolutely, if it helps the cause, but what's a deepfake? And I think that's just such a reminder that so many people don't know, they don't have this knowledge. So it really is up to us to spread awareness, and we do have the responsibility to do that. The next is, of course, be careful what we share on social media, which I think is a no-brainer, but we can all do with the regular reminder. In law enforcement overseas, they're not just running training for employees, but they're actually starting to run training for family and friends of employees, because often it's not just what we share on social media that can jeopardize our security and our organization's security, but it's what our family and friends share about us. So I thought that was a really interesting trend that's actually going on in the UK, which is pretty cool. The next is to, of course, not trust Wi-Fi, even your home Wi-Fi. I personally never do internet banking on my home Wi-Fi, and I recommend the same to you. And always update your browser. A vulnerable browser, I don't know if I even mentioned it earlier, but Henry had a vulnerable browser, which is what enabled us to run the man in the browser attack. And a vulnerable browser means that it's so easy for someone to hack into our browser, and once they're in the browser, they can sit there forever and we wouldn't even notice. So that's another really important tip. And the last is to be aware of tailored phishing campaigns specific to you. I recently, last week, Harriet and myself were in Singapore for BSidesCbr and the Formula One, which was really fun. And I dined at a restaurant. And then the next day, I received an email to say, thank you so much for dining at our restaurant. Here is a link to book again. We're going to look after you next time you come. And it looked like it was from the reservation company that I had booked through, and it wasn't. And it just goes to show that a lot of these platforms, they're either already compromised, or they sell our data, or they do both. And we really need to be aware of tailored phishing campaigns, because they are increasing. It's so much easier to do now. And a lot of what we share on social media, you don't even know who's following you, who could leverage that information to target you. So yeah, those are some of my tips, and I'll move on for you.
Thank you. I also love that restarting a computer is still the number one way to get out of a tech situation. I would agree with Chantelle. I've seen so many, such a change over the last few years in terms of the recognition of AI security, but there's still so many people where I mention AI security and they assume that I'm talking about AI for cybersecurity, right? And people have never really considered AI systems as an attack surface in their own right. It's definitely changing, but it's really important that as, organizations, but, in your roles as cyber and information security professionals as well, that this is something that we're being aware of. And there are more resources now that help us be aware of it, but especially for those people in your organizations who aren't as tech literate as you guys might be. The other thing is to take it seriously. So just as we have, a really mature security ecosystem around our computer systems, I would argue that we need to be adapting all of those traditional cyber and information security principles into the world of AI. Like AI security and adversarial machine learning is a traditionally academic field for data scientists. And as a data scientist, I learned to prioritize efficiency and accuracy of my models. And sometimes, we have to consider bias depending on the circumstance, but I was never taught about security. This is a really new and emerging threat, and it's changing. So all of the things we do around risk managing our cyber systems, we need to apply to AI as well. That includes all of technology, people, and process. Slide ahead. There are more resources out there now. It's definitely maturing as a field. There's an OWASP ML Top 10. MITRE Atlas is the repository that has TTPs for adversarial machine learning attacks. You'll be familiar with MITRE ATT&CK. There's now an Artificial Intelligence Security Center as part of the US government through the NSA. And there's lots of private companies now that are dealing in AI security, like my company, I guess. But it's nice that this is really increasing and the different kinds of help and services and products are really out there. There's also educational resources. I don't want to be too much of a shout out, but Harriet Hacks is my YouTube channel and podcast that I co-present with Tanya. So if you want to learn more about AI security, you can listen to that as well. But beyond that, please do keep in touch with both of us. It's such a pleasure to be able to present to all of you on something that we are really passionate about. And for all of you to come and show your support means quite a lot. Especially, coming back to Canberra, I remember the first BSides I went to was 3 years ago, I think, and I think that was the first time where I was meeting a group of people who were so willing to collaborate and work together on something that, I thought was important, AI security. And it was definitely one of the reasons that I felt sort of confident enough to take the leap and start my own company. And I know Chantelle has experiences like that as well. So thank you for being the kinds of people who will come to a BSides and to, contribute and learn. And please keep doing that. Do stay in touch. But we also have, I think, some time for questions as well.
A great presentation. Are there any questions in the audience? We have our runners willing to get to you if you raise your hand. I think there's a speaker at the... Yep.
I don't know, maybe not after this presentation.
I'm interested to hear about your concerns about Wi-Fi, considering you're going from Wi-Fi to the internet. Surely the internet is more insecure?
I think that, unfortunately, anything is insecure, right? If someone wants to target you, there are so many ways to do so. Even I was doing some research and they were saying, oh, a VPN will protect you from a Wi-Fi hack, but that's not true. It makes it harder for an attacker, but it doesn't protect you either. So, yeah.
So I'd be happier running through my home Wi-Fi than being on the internet, surely.
Sorry, can you say that again?
You were making comments about Wi-Fi being insecure, but I'd say the internet is more insecure, surely.
I guess it depends on what you're doing on there, but yes, if someone wanted to target you, and in this instance, you know, as we know, sophisticated threat actors, they want to, if they're financially motivated, so they'll do anything to target someone. So in this instance, being in Canberra and that was our target, it was very easy to do so. I actually did it at home. I have the Alpha network adapter, which you can purchase off Amazon for $100, and I did it to my own home network, and it's incredibly easy. It's pretty scary. And there's actually a $30, if anyone's heard, Pornogotchi, which is this little device. It kind of looks like a Tamagotchi, maybe that's why they got the name, and it makes Wi-Fi hacking even easier, and it's a tiny device, $30. You can walk around and it will sniff all the networks within your vicinity, and it has a little face on it where it's like a sad face, and it means it's not scanning any Wi-Fi networks, so you need to take it out and charge it to change the face to happy, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, I'd say definitely both insecure, but it depends on in what context we're talking about. But yes, Wi-Fi's can easily be hacked.
But surely on top of that, the protocols will be encrypted, your TLS, hopefully not SSL, yeah? TLS 1.2, 1.3. So therefore, if you sniff it, it'll just be encrypted, surely.
Given there's a break after this as well, we're happy to set a break. So
sorry, it's a bit hard to hear over the microphone, but yes, we can have another chat about it.
Check. Pornogotchi is really cool. They also communicate via a mesh and you share some of those creds. So if anyone's got them, watch out. But have you played with? So two-part question. Have you played with Nightshade yet? Actually poisoning some of the pools all the training data for another form of a backdoor. And before you answer, if anyone knows the artist that made Hyperface, can you please get them to reach out to me? Because he's really cool. He does some of the same stuff you're talking about. But yeah, Nightshade mainly. Have you played with it? Is it a vector?
Sorry, I couldn't quite hear all of that question, but you're talking about Nightshade. So for other people in the room, Nightshade is one of many kinds of tools where they're implementing these kinds of adversarial the adversarial noise to different images to either like protect it from copyright claims or reverse image searches or those kinds of things. There's a suite of technologies. What exactly was the question? Sort of how effective those different tools are? Sorry, I couldn't hear that either, but I think I got the gist. So when I was doing this research, and sort of the same as Tanya, we found that there was quite a lot of tools that will address specific parts of the problem, but they're not necessarily generalizable to all kinds of models or all kinds of contexts. And like we love the work that those tools are doing, Nightshade, Forks. There's lots of really good use cases out there, and I think maybe the challenge now is being able to mature all of those tools to being, I guess, cool, I don't know, academic add-ons. That's not, not a dig at them at all, but I think the problem that I see is that there's no mandate for companies to have to consider those kinds of defensive measures. You know, if they want to add something like Nightshade or Forks, amazing, that's great, good on them. But there's no standards, few regulations that mean that companies actually have to integrate those kinds of security measures into their AI systems right now, although that is changing over the next couple of years.
We might have to stop it there. If you've got any more questions, please hit up the speakers during the break. Let's thank these amazing speakers one more time.
Thank you.
Thank you.